Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional.
Hey there, to the creatives, sensitives, healers, and deep thinkers. How the heck are you? I am not at my home, and I use a cheat sheet every time I do that intro. I think I got it right. So how the heck are you? What's going on? This is going to be brief. When you hear the episode, you will know, but Jenna and I have a little surprise for you. What we talk about in this episode is the gift of spontaneity, but also just allowing whatever comes up to come up and having fears and travel and being with people that you don't know and being possibly overwhelmed, overstimulated, having things be too loud, but trusting that it will work out. People will get their needs met and that there's plenty of ways that people can work together. It's just a beautiful episode. I really don't want to give too much away because I want you to have the excitement of what happened. We're excited. I don't know if you'll be excited. I think I'm just going to let you listen to the episode. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Where are you right now?
I am downstairs in my basement office, where I usually am whenever we record, where all my equipment lives.
Okay.
Where are you, my dear?
I am 2 stories above you in your home in Yay! Pennsylvania. With your dog who's making a little bit of noise behind me. So I don't know if that's going to come through or not. So we had a little bit of a surprise trip. I'll let you describe who it was, but probably a month ago, you had a plan to go to the Poconos for the week. And I'm just going to say friend at this point. I'll let you define the relationship. Reached out and invited me. And there were going to be 10, 12 people there. And I thought, no, thank you. It does not sound like a good time.
Yes.
I wanted to go, but it just it felt like, I think that's just too much. And then on this past Saturday, the last Saturday of June, the 2 of you reached out via Polo and invited me again. And I decided to fly to Pennsylvania the next day. And then, so I arrived late Sunday night and we were leaving on Monday to Friday for the Poconos. And then the plan was to come back here and I was going to leave Saturday at around noon. But I bought a ticket that was refundable. And you had said, if it was too much, you could drive me to the airport and I could leave early because I really was nervous. And I can't remember all of my fears, but I know one of them was that historically when I travel, something happens and I feel really unsafe and I just want to be home where it feels safe and familiar. And I drove to San Francisco, it's probably been 40 years ago, and I got to a friend's house and I just panicked and I turned around and left and I don't even know what it was. And so I had this fear of what if that happens? And I thought, well, when I get fearful and dysregulated, what do? I call Jen. Well, Jen's going to be there with me. So if I fall apart, then I know Jen will be there and I'll be okay. This fear of the unknown and that fear of being overwhelmed and overstimulated and unsafe. And I really had to walk myself through that. The other thing is I said I have to have my own room. There were 10 of us, 3 dogs that comprised of 4 kids, 2 19, 20-year-olds and 4 adults in one home.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I have to have my own room. And that ended up not being an issue at all. And having the dogs there was super comforting for me.
Yeah, the dogs were awesome. It was a nice big house.
Mm-hmm.
The fabulous T, who's someone I've been getting really close to and got this great house. I felt like we had to send out a search party to find someone sometimes.
Yeah. And
it was nice to get away to the mountains. And we so much wanted you to join us. And no pressure. I get it, though, the fear of the unknown. What is this going to be like? I'm glad that you felt, I guess, the confidence in our friendship to take the risk, take the chance, and that you knew you'd be taken care of, because that was really, I think, a very big theme of the week. It was like It's funny. I absolutely love nonviolent communication, although I don't use it in a very proscripted way, as far as like say this and then say that. But the assertion that everybody's feelings were okay and that everyone's needs we were going to be curious about them and that those needs were going to get met, and that really it was just the strategy to get the needs met that could be in conflict, but nothing else.
Yeah.
So
I want to go back and talk about specifically the things that I did to make traveling more comfortable for me, because I decided to meet with my clients during the week. For me, I felt that would be more grounding, and I had a light enough schedule that it didn't feel like I'd be wrapped up with clients all day long. And it did end up being great. And when obviously I wasn't in the same place that I normally am. And so one of my clients asked, where are you? And they had just been asked to travel, and they were like, nope. And so we talked about some of the strategies that I used, and they said it was really helpful. But I want to come back to that, but I want to jump forward. Having so many kids, preteens, hormones, young adults, animals, different backgrounds, a lot of things came up for different people during the week. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But I really think that we all created a beautiful healing space. And what I had shared is when I was 30 and went to live in a recovery home for my eating disorder for almost a year, what I really got out of that experience of what it was like to live in an environment that had structure and that was consistent, and we communicated and we talked about things and there was flexibility. It was like that whole sense of, and this is no shade to my mom as a single parent, but she was single and stressed and it was hard, and I could never be a single parent. So this is not about her inadequacies, but the safety and comfort that I felt of living in an environment that was predictable and structured and flexible and focused on relationships. And I believe that happened for a number of the people that were there this week that did not have that experience growing up. And I think you and I'm not saying we're the only ones, created a lot of emotional safety, you more so than I did because everybody had met you before and I was new. But I think that was a big theme, and it also created safety for me to see. I love how you are with your kids, and I've seen it, but to live with you 24/7 for, I think it'll be 8 days now, to see how your kids are so free to express themselves in the moment and how accommodating you are, created even more security and safety for me. And I think that I feel like I'm jumping around, but when we came back, so I ended up doing a lot of driving. The first day I was here, we drove to New Jersey. We drove up to the Poconos. I think we spent a good 3 to 4 hours, like me driving as the only adult that was driving in a vehicle, which really ended up being a great experience. But when we got home on Friday night, I told you before we got here, like if 10 is about ready to have a meltdown, I'm about at an 8. I'm hungry. I'm tired. You offered some suggestions. And I said, when I get this way, everything feels too much, so I can't even ask you for what I want, because if I can't do it, I can't imagine you doing it. So we came in and we still need to do some unpacking, but you let me lay down on the couch, and I sobbed. And it felt like a child, like, I'm just so tired. I'm just so tired. Mm-hmm. And I rested, and you all did what you needed to do. And when I woke up, there was food for me. So again, this week has been so much about being okay no matter where you're at, and communicating and having all of those things be okay. And it was healing for me. And I know for a fact that it was really healing for a number of the people that I don't think have ever experienced this before.
It was so beautiful. I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about when you and I first visited, at your house.
Mm-hmm. Which was 2 months ago.
Right.
After 4 years.
That's so great. I love that. And I just love the spontaneity. Both trips were very spontaneous for me. I didn't know I was coming. T was the one for my birthday who had bought me the plane ticket out to your place.
Right.
But I remember talking about it after, and I think it was the frequent, just like checking in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just, it's funny. Like, I don't think it's it's certainly not maybe simple, but not easy easy, but not so. No, just a lot of checking in.
Mm-hmm.
What are you needing? And I know that my kids are kind of used to that and will do that for each other and for others.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten better about checking in for what I need myself.
Yeah.
I love that you said that there were a few times, we joke with the dogs, who's the baby?
Mm-hmm.
And, really I know I've said a lot of times, like, adulthood is a myth. Mm-hmm. Because we all get hungry and just need a sandwich, or a nap. And the parallel process between adults and children, I think, are astonishing. But I think it's the frequent checking in. Like, I know at one moment, one of the kidults, I love that term, one of our baby adults had broken a glass and reflexively was kind of expecting to have the adult get angry. And of course, I didn't. And I was very focused on whether or not she was okay and didn't want her to get cut or anything like that. And I think it was just something about making space for each other, and that really we encouraged each other to speak our truth. And when there's enough safety there, and that you don't have to get defensive about that. It's like someone was making noise when someone else wanted to sleep, and you say that, and then you do your best, and you really give each other the benefit of the doubt. And it was probably one of the best vacations I had ever been on. And I do think it was the high degree of consciousness and care. Certainly not calm. I mean, this is a pretty chaotic environment at times with all of us. And that made it fun. And I do remember one of your fears, if I can speak for you,
Sure.
was the fear of being thought weird if you didn't socially like show up to all aspects. And I do think that there was for all of us moments of retreat to do the self-care. And then in doing that and having given ourselves permission and each other permission to do that, we do that for each other.
Right.
And then everyone kind of reconvenes pretty refreshed.
Right. And I know one of my fears, not knowing what the structure was going to be, is I'm often very unaware of when I'm hungry. And all of a sudden I recognize it and I need to eat right away. And what I imagined was there would be structured meals and it would be 4:00 and we'd be eating at 5 or 6 and I'd be ravenous and I'd want to eat and then I'd get yelled at. Because when I recognize that I'm hungry, I really need to eat. That didn't even happen and it wasn't even an issue, but I wanted to talk to you about what my fears were ahead of time. And that was certainly one of them. And when I flew in on Sunday night, I think it was a long day. I got up at 3. I was at the airport at 4:30. And by the time I got to your house, it was 9:00 Eastern time. And you were so sweet that you could tell that I was frazzled. So you went to get my luggage from the carousel. And then I went out to the car with tea. And even when you hugged me, like your voice was loud. The first time I didn't say anything. The second time I did. And I keep earplugs on me all the time. And so I put them in when we went out to the car. My nervous system was just really dysregulated. And you asked if I wanted to sit in the front or the back seat. It's hot here. It's humid. We don't have humidity. So again, I asked for the front seat, kept my earplugs in the entire next day, which I normally do not do at home. But it took a while for my system to get regulated. And then when we drove to the mountains, there was a huge storm. In fact, all of our phones went off in the car because there was a flash flood warning. So it was nighttime when you have your windshield wipers going as fast as they can and you still can't see in front of you. I've got 6 people in the van that I'm responsible for their lives. I had someone in the car that had a very loud voice, and even with my earplugs in and trying to be mindful and being tired, the plan was you were going to drive, but then we lost a driver. So then I needed to drive. And the next day we talked about, I had a headache and I felt dysregulated or overstimulated, but it wasn't emotional. And we all talked about it. I think it was just the tension from driving in such harrowing conditions. And at one point we got off the road to just try and see if we could let the storm get ahead of us. And so being mindful of that, and then you were just so gracious. You gave me a beautiful neck and head massage. And it's like I felt so cared for. But tuning into what was that was going on, because emotionally I felt fine, but I think that was harrowing to drive in. And, I kept unclenching my fist from the steering wheel because I was just gripping it so tightly because I wanted to stay focused, and then having this noise that was louder than what I was used to. And my earplugs, I have the loop earplugs, and there's a second piece that you can put in to block off even more noise. So I put it in one ear. I still wanted to be able to hear because I could hear with them in. And even with that, it was just really loud. So that was also challenging. And we got through it.
Yeah, I think we got through it pretty well. It was scary. I was driving in a different car. And I think there's something also about acceptance, especially as neurodivergent, acceptance of our needs, our limitations, or just, and this is totally for humans, right? And being somewhat humble about that, I know has helped me a lot. So like, for instance, when you got there and I was so excited and I was shrieking in your ear, Right? And you're like, Jen, you're being too loud, which is funny because it's not something I hear all that often. But I noticed that I didn't get defensive or feel bad or like, I should have known, or like I didn't have any of that stuff, which is unusual. Like, I don't know if that's confirmation of having made friends with my inner critic, right? Like, it's okay for me to not be perfect or anticipate the needs of everyone all the time. And I was like, ooh. And I was just happy that she told me.
Yeah.
And I think that theme carried throughout the trip.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd forgotten too that when I got off the plane and was supposed to go down to where you were, something happened and there was an alarm going off upstairs. And so we were being diverted, but there weren't clear directions. I was tired. I had to go to the bathroom, and then this alarm. And because I didn't keep my purse with me and put everything in my backpack, normally I just dip right into my purse and put my earplugs in, but it was in my backpack. Again, I'm very methodical, so I know where my stuff is. But when I travel and I use a backpack, it just would have been a hassle, and I think I would have been better off. But I really believe that having to listen to that alarm, it went off the whole time I was upstairs and we sat on the tarmac for, 45 minutes waiting to come in. I think it was just all too much. And the only reason why I'm sharing this with y'all is because these are little things that happen that are very average. But when you have a nervous system that's wired and is sensitive, you add layer on layer on layer, and we have to honor ourselves. And I'm naming this because just one of these things alone could be enough to dysregulate your nervous system.
Yeah. And so what are the things that we do to bring it back, right? So I know one thing we don't want to do is push past our limitations, not acknowledge them, because then we just proceed to get more and more frazzled.
Right.
Right. But taking stock, I mean, this place we were at was so beautiful. We had mountains and clean air and a pool and plenty of space, which was a gift.
Yeah.
I know, just going kind of interior sometimes for me, even if I don't have those things available to me, because there were several times during the trip that I lost it. And it was funny with our kidults. Like, I had to tell them, look, I've lost my shirt with my kids over a broken glass before. This isn't about being perfect, right? These relationships are about having ruptures and then having repairs and checking in and being able to speak your truth, but also equally inviting the other person to speak their truth in the moment, what's alive in the moment. And then it's like, how can we take care of that? I'm trying to think about I know I had at least 2 meltdowns my own self. I'm trying to think of when they were.
One was over the tickets.
Yeah, one was over the tickets. That was so frustrating. And it's that the feedback I got was, when you're allowed to just be yourself and show your blemishes, I guess, or your limitations, like, it gives everyone else permission to show theirs. So that what had happened was the tickets, I had bought them on my phone, but there's no cell service at this place. And the woman, she just didn't tell me that I needed to get online. And, when you're hurting a 10 of us trying to all get somewhere, and that had been a big negotiation, when to leave. We kind of had the early birds and then the ones that wanted to sleep in later, and just continuing to negotiate that until we came to some consensus. I guess in that moment, I was feeling some pressure for the early birds to get us in there as quickly as we could, who had already given some concessions. And then this woman was just very unclear with her directions, and I ended up having to walk somewhere else. And then she was not giving me her full attention either, which I think was triggering for me. Yeah. She was distracted with people who were behind us. And I'm like, we do wait turns for a reason. Right.
And you asked if you could go in and she could look at your phone, and she's like, no, you have to stay out there, because there was a door and it was just a window. And
there was an insistence that I do something that I had already done, and that wasn't working. So I definitely was like, bah! But then having room for that, like when you can feel that little mini fury, like fully with people who around you who understand and who aren't getting you to be a different way, then it can just kind of, it goes away almost as quickly, for me anyway, as it comes. Not quite, but.
Right. Well, even the negotiating that I wanted to go earlier, you and I both had clients and we didn't know how long we would be in when you're trying to get 10 people, including kids, out the door. And this is where, like, my tasky part can get really, like, we're going to leave at this time. This is when we leave. And it was really interesting for me to see your ability to be in that middle and negotiate, because I wanted to leave early. Somebody else, another driver, wanted to leave later. And my concern was, well, if we say we're going to leave at 11, that it's really going to be 11:30, 11:45 by the time we get in the car. I don't want to feel rushed. I want to make sure that I have time. And I noticed myself kind of saying, well, this is what I want. And then the other person said, this is what they want. And I kind of went into collapse mode, like, okay. But I saw that you knew how important it was for me, because I really wanted to get time in at this place if I wanted it. And you were able to stay there and negotiate. And that's really a skill that if I were advocating for you, then I could do that. But when it comes to my own needs, I really struggle with how do you go back in and communicate. And sometimes that can be really hard for me.
Yeah, well, especially, I mean, if we've been brought up to subjugate our needs and our desires, right? It's just such a long-standing pattern. And it doesn't feel like it's worth, I guess, the quote unquote argument. I don't see it as an argument. I do see it as a negotiation, or as a kind of comes back to, I know early on, some of our early podcasts that we did together, how conflict is an opportunity for intimacy, right? And to really learn a little more about each other. Yeah. So, and that, I don't know, it's funny. I'm thinking about like people who've really influenced me in this way, and just been like, it's a logistic. So separating the logistics out from the person who matters, right? And then, gosh, I've been a guide for Bruce Hersey, and just the faith that he has in people. It's like, we will figure this out. Yeah. And to continue to go back in. And then once everyone's relaxed, like the creative problem solving is there. Like when we're not relaxed, it's like our creativity can kind of go out the window, and when our tension narrows, I mean, that's what happens when we're in fight or flight, right? Yeah. So.
Well, and I know too, a couple of things that the night that we got there, we had a family meeting to talk about kind of expectations and where we were at. And one of the things that I said, because I really did not anticipate having this hypersensitivity to noise. And so I had said, have earplugs in. If you talk to me and I don't hear you, please get my attention. I'm not ignoring you. And if your voice is too loud, do I have your permission to ask you to lower your voice, which is really hard for me. Then the position of where the rooms were in the house, the room that would have been ideal, the door didn't close all the way. But the room that I had a desk in it, which was perfect for seeing clients, but it was right next to the hub of where all the activity was. And it was really interesting that there was noise, there were dogs, and it ended up being fine because there was an allowance for me to be where I needed to be, as opposed to, oh my God, you're asking for so much and you're just, like, we can't accommodate you. And if it's okay for me to have the needs that I have, then I have so much room for just things that you're going to hear that you can't control, because there were 10 people and 3 dogs in the house. Of course I'm going to hear stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's another part of it.
Well, when you know everyone's trying, right?
Yeah.
You know everybody's aware and you've spoken up for yourself, and even if it can't happen, you do have more bandwidth, as opposed to, it's so funny. I try to explain this to clients because it's such a visceral thing. It's such a somatic thing, right? So anything that creates a little bit of spaciousness, keep going in that direction. Yeah. Anything that kind of shuts you down or gets more constricting. And I'm not talking about that moment when you're at the precipice and you're speaking your truth, because I know that can be a pretty scary moment. But if there's the release afterwards, it's just that, hey, there's allowances here, as opposed to this like tight clenching, like, because, and often we have to take some responsibility that we haven't spoken our truth or what our needs are. And sometimes the environment doesn't welcome that either, right? And I know you and I talk a lot about, I love the phrase that you use, like going along to get along. There are definitely moments where that is the right thing to do. But if we do that too much in our most intimate relationships, then we start to become a stranger to ourselves, and really a stranger to the other person who has no idea what might be going on inside.
Yeah. I want to talk about 2 things. One is things that I've done while traveling that have helped, that may be helpful for you. But I also want to talk about, it was not uncommon for us to eat dinner at 9:00 at night, and then there were still activities or there were games and people stayed up to go in the pool and do all this stuff. And every night by 10:00, I went to my room, did not engage in evening activities. And I had this mixed feeling about like, I'm missing out, I'm not very fun, I'm not being part of the group. And I also know that I need, especially when there's that much activity around, I need a good hour to 2 hours to wind down before I'm ready to go to sleep. And then the advantage was I was usually the first one awake in the morning because everybody was sleeping because they stayed up late. And it would be easy to, I did say to you, like, am I being weird?
Yeah.
Like, is it being weird? And you're like,
Weird
weird here.
Weird's good around here. What are you talking about? Wear your weird proudly, please.
And I also know that that's what I needed to keep my nervous system regulated. And that's part of what my need is, how I'm wired. And so taking that and honoring it. And I was talking with a friend who is also autistic, identified as HSP therapist, and she's an extrovert. And she said she would have a really hard time at night not participating and then getting burned out because the way her life is, she just doesn't get as much socializing as she needs. And it would be really hard for her to not participate in that. And I struggled. And we got to do what we got to do.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there's pros and cons to every decision we make. And I think that's part of just being able to accept that, whatever those cons are, and accept it on your own heart that it's okay. There were a couple of things, right? I know there were a few moments I was like, oh, I wish Patricia was here to hear this. And then we filled you in the morning.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it worked out. So some of the things that I did for traveling, some suggested years ago, is to create a master travel list, and I keep it on my computer. It has everything I would need for anything. And anytime I travel, I pull that list out and then I tweak it for that specific trip. So if you're someone who likes to be planned and organized, this will be helpful. If you're someone who likes to do things last minute, then go get a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom because this is going to drive you crazy. But this is part of what my self-care is, because I have this thing about I don't want to forget things. And the truth is, we were able to get things at the house. And I know that if I forget something, I can get it. But having things around me that I need it's something that gives me comfort. That structure, that order is something that really helps me when I travel. So even this morning we were talking about, I have this little bag that has all of my travel stuff in it. So I don't have to get nail clippers and Q-tips and things like that, dental floss, because I just keep it in there. So using my travel list, my plane didn't leave till 6:30 in the morning. It was recommended to get there 2 hours early. I probably could have gotten there an hour early, but I know me that if I thought I was going to miss my plane, which would have thrown everything else off, that would have been really upsetting to me. Like if it happened because it happened, then I deal with it. And I've had that happen before. But if it's in my control and my power to not miss a plane, then it's worth the extra hour to be at the airport, because that will not stress me out. And whatever I need to do to keep my nervous system regulated. And since it was a long day of travel, and I just found out Saturday that I was leaving the next day, Steve and I went out and made sure that I had some good protein snacks with me and figured out where I could get drinks so I could stay hydrated, because I didn't want to get a headache, and just making sure that I had things that were accessible if I couldn't get what I needed. Because if I get over hungry, then I get hangry. And that was a long day. And so it's like anticipating the things that we might need. It's kind of funny that I also I have this show, it's called Valeria. It's a show that's made in Spain. I downloaded these episodes to my Kindle. And because I booked my flight so late, I was in a middle seat all the time, which doesn't bother me, but I brought my Kindle to watch this show on. And I had totally forgot that it's a cable show. So there's lots of naked people in it and lots of sex scenes. Other than seeing I don't know what I can say on the podcast, so I'm just going to be vague. Other than seeing, bare women's chests, you see lots of bare behinds, and you see lots of people in the act of procreating, whether they're procreating or not, but you don't see girl parts and boy parts, but it's very clear what's going on. I watch the show at home. I don't think twice about it. And so I had my Kindle on my lap and I had somebody on my left. I had like my drink covering the screen on the other side. I had my hand. I thought, they're going to report me for watching porn. I'm going to look like I'm totally a creep. I was kind of mortified.
Aww.
And then after a while, it got too hard having my head down. So I just flipped the cover on the back of the seat.
Mm-hmm.
And when it got to those scenes, I just paused it and kind of fast forward. And then I think on the next leg of the trip, there was this really nice guy sitting next to me. And I just said, okay, I have a confession to make. Because I felt so self-conscious.
Mm-hmm.
But that was another way that I took care of myself. I knew I was going to need to be entertained. I brought a book. I brought a couple things that would work. I made sure that all my stuff was charged. I had a backup charger, that I had earplugs. And because we're military, we can go to, it's called the USO. So it's kind of like a special lounge that you can go to. But when I got to Dallas, I had a couple hours of layover. And we were in one terminal, the USO was in another terminal, you had to take a train. And at first I thought like, oh, it's too much. I get overwhelmed. And somebody said it's 10 minutes away, and I had 4 hours. And so I thought, okay, let's get curious. Let's get curious about this. So I went over there, I looked at my watch, it took 5 minutes. And they provide free beverages, and they've got food there, and they've got TVs and places you can charge your stuff and you can relax. And what I really needed to do, because my back was hurting, was to get flat and to lay down and just close my eyes, and was able to do that. And again, it took 5 minutes to get back. But if you have that nervousness like I do about, I'm going to make 4 hours. If I go over for 5 minutes, like I'm going to be late, I'm going to miss my plane. Like just trusting. And I forget, you and I have talked about this, like I forget how competent I am and how social I am. And I love being around people, and I love new things, and how group-minded I am. And it was easy being with all these people. And I was supposed to come home Saturday, and while we were driving back to New Jersey, I called my husband and said, can you see if you can get me a flight that's later on Sunday? Because I just wanted more time with you. And because there have been some things going on in the air here, there was a chance that T and her daughter would come over to stay here for the air quality. I started having some feelings about it. And I was a little nervous to tell you, but I said, gosh, if it's possible, I extended my time because I really just want some alone time with you. Your kids were here for the week and for a little bit of the time. And I love being with your kids, but I just wanted some Jen time. And you were fine with it and said, it should be fine. We'll see. And then I heard you on the phone upstairs, and I heard you go, oh no. And it's interesting. I wanted to sing like, something happened and they're coming over and I'm not going to get my time. And I started to go into that negative narrative, that fearful narrative. So when you were off the phone, I went up and told you. And then I always ask, like, how is it for you hearing that? It's fine. And that fear of I have needs, they have needs, whose needs are going to get met. Historically, it has not worked out well in my favor. And I'm almost 60 years old and I can manage. But again, that allowing and having it be safe and okay for me to tell you how I felt, and for you to totally get it. Like, yeah, you did extend. And of course you want to spend time with me. And we hope that happens, but maybe not. But allowing for all of this, I think, is part of what the healing is, of just being able to be authentic and to show up and have all the feels come up, and to not have to stress out about, oh my God, what if they come? What if I should have just left on Saturday? All of that stuff.
Yeah, I was so delighted that you wanted to stay a little longer. And yeah, I mean, again, like the feelings and needs, they can be openly discussed, because that's not what's in conflict. It's the strategy to get them met. And if you can really find it in your heart that everybody matters, right? And that all the needs, if you were the other person and in their shoes, you would totally get that need. You would understand it. In fact, you probably have a story that's really similar. Yeah, so I really was just fine hearing that. And it's funny, there were a couple of times during the trip, I think there was a moment where I wanted to be spending with you and talking. There was a moment that I wanted to be spending with T and talking, and one or both of my kids, And if in that moment I'm constricted and I feel pressure, and like, again, it's that creativity, right? Like if I can stay relaxed, if I can stay, yep, there's all of these things happening. There's lots of needs coming up, including my own, because I have to matter too. It can be so creative. Aster wanted to play chess. I wasn't really that interested in playing chess anymore, because my kid, it should be called Massacre Chess. But T is a good chess player. So I spent time with them playing chess together after you and I had gotten a chance to talk. And there's just so much fluidity and creativity if you can stay open and curious. Curiosity is such a good antidote to like fear of the unknown too, right? Like just stay and to make it, does this happen to you when you're in conversation with people? Do you get song lyrics that just come into your head? I'm thinking of I'll let you answer that question.
I do. I also get cartoon pictures in my head.
Oh,
that's
cool.
how my brain processes. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I just heard this song in my head, the Bastille song Pompeii, I think it's called, where it's like, how am I going to be an optimist about this? Is the lyric. I think making an inner commitment to that, particularly, you're on vacation with all these people and everybody matters. So when you stay open and stay curious, there's lots of ways that I can acknowledge that perhaps T had a need, you had a need. There's one obvious way to get them met that's in conflict, but then there's so many other ways that you can validate the need, validate the feelings around the need, and get really creative. I mean, you flew all the way the heck out here. There are other options. And I think that that's one thing that if we can do that for each other, and if we understand that it's okay for us to have boundaries and to acknowledge our own needs and desires, and then still not make it just about that, right? Because how many times do we assign meaning? Well, I had, a loved one ask me if they could come and stay with me, and they really can't for lots of different reasons. But to make that mean something about a comment about how much I love them was not fair, because it had nothing to do with that. It had lots of other practical things that it had to do with. So just being careful of the meaning that we're making of things, because I think what would tend to happen would be, oh, well, what I do in this moment somehow means who I care about the most.
Right.
And this, with having 2 children with some decent, high needs and some interesting, all children are interesting and have an assortment of needs, but it really is. It's like, it's not about that. It's about what makes sense in the moment, what's, and everyone's valid. And then it's just, let's get creative. And it turns to be fun, in my opinion, because you're all working now together for one common goal, which is to validate everyone's needs and to find creative ways to get them met, as opposed to this us versus them, or it's this or it's that. It just doesn't have to be that way at all.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed, and then we probably need to wrap it up, that your kids are so comfortable having needs and asking to have their needs met. And there were times when you needed to go do something else, and one of your kids was fine spending time with me and having me be present for them so you could do your thing, which touched and melted my heart. I think I finished, I'm like, your mom's a hard act to follow. And they said, what does that mean? And then they walked away, and I thought, oh, you would have asked, would you like a hug? And I just didn't think about it. It was fine, but it's just, there was a part of me that feels like it's hard to show up like you. But then one of your kids said something like that you and I are very similar. What did they say?
Yeah. Let me think for a second. Aster said something like, Aster just adores you and really enjoyed.
I love both of your kids, and it was nice. Aster was my co-pilot riding all the way up there and back. And there's something about their presence that is just really calming and grounding for me. And driving back, I needed to get my boarding pass while I was driving. So before we got in the car, I said, would you be willing to do this? And this is what you're going to do. And so I had a little timer on my phone. They got my boarding pass for me. And my son Josh is very much like that. I love both of my kids. They offer me lots of different things, but their presence was just incredibly grounding. And Liv is just such a joy, so loving and so delightful to be around.
Thank you. It's so nice at my mama heart to hear nice things about my children. Yeah. I appreciate that. But yeah, Aster made a comment just about how similar in energy that we are. And I know they really enjoyed meeting you. And I loved having you in my city, in my space, in my state, get to meet some of my friends. So yeah, it's wonderful.
I think it was Liv, though, that said we were also very similar. Yeah, which is just the ultimate compliment.
Oh, I think so too.
I just love you. We were talking this morning, I know we need to end, about it feels like it's such a simple word. So we were looking in the thesaurus because the whole trip has felt just very easy.
We're such nerds. We were looking in the thesaurus this morning.
Well, I think I told you when Aster and I were driving, they said this is a parkway. And I'm like, what's a parkway? Because we use different words on the West Coast. So we looked up like freeway, highway, boulevard, parkway. Like, I love that they love to nerd out too on that kind of stuff, because I want to know what's the difference between those things.
Yeah, I think it's telling that we don't have a word, because we really were struggling to find a word, because easy wasn't quite it. There were plenty of complications, or there were a lot between 10 people, and even the dogs had very different personalities. But we couldn't find maybe ease. Yeah. I don't know. I think having just a lot of confidence and curiosity about each other and really caring. Like, I'm really wanting to know. I knew everyone on the trip at varying degrees of depth. But there's a human being here that I can always stay curious about, whichever one it was. Yeah.
But even coming back here and negotiating, you weren't feeling well in the morning, and I had some things I wanted to do, and creating space for that and making sure you got to do what you needed to do this weekend since your kids aren't here. But it just felt like all needs were okay. And something happened. I got a communication that was unexpected that activated me while we were there. And I had one of those big boohoo sobs while I was there, and you were present for me. And like whatever came up was okay, but there wasn't, I mean, I had resistance about not knowing, but there wasn't any of this, I hate that this is happening. This is hard. I don't want to be here. Like all of it was like, oh, this is just a part of it. It was just beautiful.
Yeah. Yes. Saying yes to all the different aspects of life, right? Up and down. If you're doing it right, you're living a full life, you're going to have those moments too.
Absolutely. Is there anything else before we wrap up?
When you coming back?
October. We talked about this because I want to see the leaves change. That was the plan.
All right. So when am I going to you?
I don't know. When do you want to come?
Oh, soon.
The plan is twice a year.
Yeah.
And so we've known each other for 4 years and not ever met in person until April, the end of April. And then 2 months later, I came out. I think came from Sunday to Sunday. So I think that's 8 days.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
And I want to see the leaves change in October.
Thanks for extending your stay and for coming out and your spontaneity. It was so fun.
Thanks for letting me. I know. I surprised everybody, including myself. All right. Well, thanks, Jen. I love you, and I'll see you in a few minutes.
I love you too. Yeah, let's go have some lunch. Bye.
All right. Bye. Hey again. So what did you think? Was that helpful for you? If you were interested in taking the online HSP course, I don't have the dates with me, but I'm pretty sure that by the time this is going to air, that registration is coming up. It is an amazing experience if you want to be with other people that are wired like you. I am working on getting a group together for newly diagnosed, late diagnosed, high masking autistics. I don't have it ready yet. The course that I have for the online HSP course, Jen and I recorded all the videos. I don't have my notes in front of me, but we talk about boundaries, perfectionism, turning your perceived weaknesses into strengths, embracing your emotions, learning to create a lifestyle that honors the HSP. There are 10 sessions, and like I said, I don't have my notes in front of me. HSPs show up so differently in the world. Neurodivergent show up differently in the world. So it's not only about the education, but it's about the experience. And the reason why I created a 10-week course is it gives us time to really get to know each other, to settle in, to see how similar we are and how different we are. Some of the groups have gone on to continue to meet after we've ended. I just reached out to Kelly Vance, who was on the podcast quite some time ago, and she and her group are still meeting, and it's been quite some time. I don't know if we're going to have time to record an episode. There's also a small chance that this episode will come out after registration closes. Again, because I'm not at home and I don't have my dates, and it's really important for me to record as soon as I finish an episode. There is a little glitch. If you've missed the deadline for registering, I am planning to run another course starting in February of 2024. Geez. But to be able to make these connections, to feel seen and heard, we talk about whatever's going on in your life because it really ties into all aspects of being an HSP, being neurodivergent. If you're interested, the best thing to do is to go to my website, Unapologetically Sensitive. There's a tab that says HSP groups. There's tons of podcast episodes, short 1-minute audio clips. There's a video of a couple people that took the course. So if you want to know more about it, there's also a description of what we cover week by week. There's early registration and then regular registration. Again, I don't have the dates because I'm not at home with my little cheat sheets. But if you're craving connection, to be around other people who are wired like you, if you feel like you're a weirdo, an alien, nobody gets you, this really is a great place to learn more about your trait, how it shows up, how to create more joy and learn to thrive more in your life. If you're interested in working with Jen, you can reach out to her at jen@heartfulnessconsulting.com. If you're interested in working with me, I'd love to send you to my website, unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a contact me page there. I've got a couple spots open right now and would be happy to do a free 20-minute consult to see if we're a good fit. I think that's all I have. I hope you're doing well. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. You have a right to be here. You have a right to take up space. You have a right to have needs and wants. You have a right to all of your feelings, feeling angry, frustrated, disappointed, let down, sad, tired, lonely. You also have a right to take up space, to feel joy, to feel pleasure, to find things that you enjoy that give you peace. It's okay for people to not like you, to not get you, to not understand you. There are people, your people, who will love who you are and how you show up in the world. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.